The review and reevaluate means simply review where you are in your business plan and then reevaluate whether or not you're on target for your long-range goal. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to readjust down. It could be that you need to readjust up, but you need to do that a minimum of every 3 months. I know associates, most of the top producers are doing it on a monthly basis, and I even know some that do it on a weekly basis. Now, if at any point when you're doing this, reevaluating your business plan, you're not at the level of success that you would hope to be at, you can always find the problem. And I call this Real Estate 101. There are only 3 areas within real estate that they're going to have a problem. The first is I am or am not making appointments. Now, if you're not making appointments, then there are 2 things that are going to be at fault here. Number 1, I'm so fearful of rejection, I can't pick up that 500-pound phone. I'm just paralyzed into inactivity. Trust me when I tell you this, if that is the case, you need to get over that fear or get out of real estate, because there is no other way to success other than prospecting. And then number 2, if I am able to pick up the phone, but I'm still not making the appointments, then I don't know my scripts. Scripts have to be internalized to the point that you have literally memorized them. Now, I know that sounds kind of old school to memorize something, but the problem is that if you don't memorize it, what you'll find yourself doing is simply engaging the seller in conversation. And the longer you engage the seller in conversation, the less likely you are to make an appointment. If you memorize your scripts, then what you'll find is that you're focused on why you're on the phone. And that's not to ingratiate yourself with the owner. It's not to ask them about their property. It's not to make friends. It's not to see if they'll invite you back for dinner tomorrow night. It's to make an appointment. And the longer you stay on the phone, the less likely that is to happen. You see, when we engage the seller in conversation, we're hoping that they're going to ask us. And it's exactly the same thing on a listing presentation. When we are so fearful of that rejection that it paralyzes us, whether it's on the phone or in a listing presentation, to the point that we can't ask for the appointment or ask for the order. So if you're not making the appointments, 2 things. Either you're so fearful of rejection you can't pick up the phone, or number 2, you haven't internalized the scripts. And they literally have to be memorized word for word. After you've done that, you can paraphrase them, because at that point, you'll be focused enough to know exactly what you need to do on every appointment, and that is make the appointment. The second area that's going to have a bearing on whether or not you're at that level of success is that you are or are not taking the listing. Now, there are 3 things that could be possibly wrong here. Number 1, you don't know the presentation. And it is just that. It's a presentation. From the moment you get out of your car until you get back into your car, it is literally a Broadway play. And you need to know how to do that word for word and all of the 4 component parts. In another webinar, I'll try to cover that. The second is I'm not asking for the listing. And this goes back to what we were talking about, internalizing the scripts. You're not going to believe this, but the longest listing presentation I've ever been on in my life, I hate to say this, lasted 7 hours. I got there at 11 o'clock in the morning. I stayed until 6 o'clock at night. I had lunch with them. I had dinner with them. I didn't get the listing. A friend of mine, another manager of another office, we had a game that we used to play, and that was if one of us didn't get the listing, we had to call the other and tell them, and then they went after the listing, and obviously if you got it, then you ragged on the other person. What the seller never knew is that we split the listing. But the point is that the next day, she went on that listing and got it, and I said, Kay, I'm sorry, but how long were you there? And I didn't tell her how long I was there. And she said, well, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, my average. And it was at that point my real estate career changed, because it was at that point that I realized I wasn't in that house to get a listing. I was in that house doing what I do best, talking, hoping that at some point they were going to say, man, you know everything. Where do we sign? They never said it. I never asked for it, and I walked out with a listing. What I'm about to tell you didn't happen overnight. It took probably, I'm guessing, maybe 3 months for this to solidify to the point that it became a religious habit. But if you were to look at any listing file of any listing that I've ever taken about 3 months after that 7-hour appointment, you'll find at least 1, 2, sometimes 3 and 4 check marks on the bottom of every listing agreement. And those check marks represent every time that I ask for the order. And if I walk out of a seller's house without a check mark on the bottom of that listing agreement, I wasn't in the house to get a listing. I was in the house simply talking. And I was so afraid of rejection that I couldn't ask for the order. In 2 situations, I actually had a seller ask me, what are you doing? I just told you I'm not signing anything, when I put the check mark down. And I explained exactly what I was doing. that I always make sure that I ask for the order. If I don't have any check marks, I wasn't there to get listing. I was just there talking. And I've had 2 sellers list with me just for that same reason, asking me basically, do you do that with buyers? And ended up listing with me. The third reason why I'm not taking the listing is I'm not following up after the listing presentation. So these are the 3 reasons why I'm not getting the listing. I'm making the calls, I'm making the appointments, but I'm not able to take the listing because I don't know my presentation. I'm either not asking for it or I am asking for it, but they delay me a couple of weeks or whatever, and I don't follow up on that. The third area of Real Estate 101 where there could be a problem is my listings are not selling. And there are basically 2 reasons for this. Number 1, I'm not firm enough in establishing the market value when I go to on the listing presentation. I don't know my material. I don't have a CMA. I really am just asking the seller, what are you asking? And the seller says something about, $500,000. I said, no problem, we can get that. When in reality, I have no idea, no clue what I should be asking for. So I'm not firm enough in establishing the market value. And then the second is something we talked about last week, and that is that I didn't load the dice. In other words, I didn't make the listing so attractive to the other agent, the selling agent, and to the buyer that they wanted to buy the property and wanted to show and sell the property that it wasn't marketable. Even though the property's right dead on the market, there's a distinct possibility that it isn't going to sell simply because there are no showings.